Welcome to the HeartStream Musings podcast, a podcast to help you on your journey of self-love. I'm your host, Lisa Mae Francisco, a self-love coach and inner child guide. In the podcast, we'll dive deep on how to heal your inner child wounds, break your relationship patterns, and liberate your truth so you can claim the relationships in life that you deserve. Thanks so much for listening. I'm super excited that you're here. Hey everybody, welcome back to the HeartStream Musings. It has been a while since I recorded a solo episode. I batch record all of my content. So lately I've been having a couple of guests on and I just felt the real need to come on here and expressing myself, expressing my opinions, expressing what's going on, my insights is something that is very near and dear to me. And so that's why I love having this podcast. That's why I have loving this platform. That's why I appreciate you of listening. And hopefully some of the stuff that I say does resonate and you find comfort in it, that you aren't alone on your self-love healing journey. And so the topic today that I'm going to riff on is about vulnerability and how it relates to your authentic truth, how it shows up in group dynamics, how it shows up in our ability to heal ourselves, to love ourselves. And it was actually inspired by a client session that I had recently, and we were talking about allowing oneself to have the full spectrum of a human experience, which is all of your emotions. And as I was working with this client, it came to me of this concept of emotional containment, meaning we only allow ourselves to experience one aspect of our situation or life experience that we can feel in our body. And so as I was reflecting on my own journey of what it's been like with vulnerability and opening up, it has been quite the journey. And I'm going to paint like the before and after. And, growing up, it was very difficult for me to express my emotions. I was a very, very sensitive kid. I know I have no judgment on the word sensitive. I actually think of it as very neutral, as if, my hair is dark. Like that's how I look at it as. It's just facts. I don't have an emotional reaction to it. I think, people who call me sensitive or, it's actually more on them. It's their judgment. It's their attachment to that word that, it's elicited for them rather than me. It's just like, oh, okay, I'm sensitive. And so that's pretty remarkable, right? The neutrality around it of it's neither good or bad. It's just like, oh yeah, my hair is dark. I am sensitive. And it took me a long time to get to that place because as I mentioned, it wasn't, being able to have all of these different ranges of emotions and being sensitive or, people had to tiptoe around me because you had to really handle me with like kid gloves with care because I just take things to heart. And I can actually pinpoint the very first time where I just felt super empathic, meaning I feel a lot of people's emotions. So I am clairsentient, meaning like I can feel your emotions. That's why sometimes doing coaching work can actually be really heavy for me because like I can only handle 1 or 2 clients a day. If I do more than that, I get super burnt out because I am actually emotionally alchemizing your experiences as well. And it's almost like, to me, kind of like emotional cannibalism. Like I will eat your emotions as I'm doing EFT tapping with you. No joke. When I was doing a bunch of EFT sessions back to back, sometimes like 5 sessions back to back in a row, like, yo, that was so difficult. And I started to ask myself, like, why am I so tired? Why do I feel emotionally drained at the end of the day? And so when you hear, different experiences of what people come to you with, and you are tapping along with them, like literally we are working together. I am actually physically tapping on my body as they are tapping on their body. That is me tapping. Even if it is not my challenge that I'm bringing to the coaching session, it still has residual effects on me energetically. And what is it, like my my neurotransmitters, like rewiring my neural repowering, like I experience that, because what happens to me is I actually get dreams from that. Like I remember when I was doing it hardcore every day, when I was getting certified, that I would have dreams like about my ex. And I was like, did not even have a coaching session about my ex. Like, I'm not even coaching with anybody right now, but it just had that effect on me. And so I say this because I am a very emotional person. And so when I was a little kid, I remember watching the movie Gremlins. I don't remember too much of it. But I remember the main character, like the little gremlin, was stuck almost like in a heater. And I just bawled my eyes out. And I was a little kid. I think 3 or 4. I was 3 years old. And my mom came to me and she couldn't understand why I was crying. And like she had to turn it off. She literally had to turn off the movie. And I remember that happened with Bambi. I've only seen that movie once because I just could not handle, you know, the violence in that movie of parents dying and leaving their baby children to fend for themselves. It was really difficult. And I just feel a lot of emotion. Someone might think, well, then why are you in the profession of coaching? It's because I'm really fucking good at it. I'm really fucking good at it. And I love doing it. But emotional mental hygiene, that's like a whole other episode. And so for me, I've learned to use that as my superpower, right? And so because I was known as being too sensitive, kind of like high emotional maintenance, I internalized that as being something bad. And instead of feeling into my sadness, I saw growing up in my home that it was very comfortable to be in your anger. And so I thought, okay, well, this emotion must be safe. So I am going to feel my anger instead. And so it's very easy for me to tap into it. But over the years, I've learned and I've heard this and like, different mentors I've worked with, that behind the anger is sadness. And so whether or not you tend to feel your anger easily or you feel your sadness more, it's like actually two sides of the same coin. And so for me, feeling my anger so easily, and so I allow myself to feel that emotion, knowing that on that journey, I'm going to eventually feel sadness. And so, if you're someone that feels sadness easily, allow yourself to feel that sadness so you can get towards that anger. And also, don't shame yourself if you don't get there right away. A lot of the times, I myself might hold myself to perfectionistic standard of, well, if I'm not feeling a certain emotion fully, does that mean I'm actually processing it? Like, do I need to go balls to the wall with a certain emotion? And I will say over with time, it does get easier, it does get better. And I'm sharing this journey of almost being completely shut down, kind of closed off, being disassociated from my emotions and vulnerability, and how uncomfortable it makes me feel. Like I could not be like in my body embodied. And embodied, that term is like thrown around so loosely. It just means to be present. It just means to be like in the moment of where you are, not in your mind of like thinking about some other thing, but like if you're having an experience with someone, being present with them, not thinking about the future, not thinking about the past. It is in your body. And so there's all these different practices of what you can do, but literally the biggest and greatest practice you can do is just sit with it. And so as I, obviously kind of anesthetized from my feelings, it was a very long journey of how do I actually it wasn't even in my purview of like how do I get to feel my feelings. Um I just didn't explore that realm or that possibility or that topic because it just wasn't even on the menu of where I was at that evolution or that stage of my life. And I remember, the first time that I actually understood how much I was out of my body was until I got sober in 2011. That's when I realized, oh, I was using, first it was TV, then it was music, then it was, alcohol to get out of my body to like feel a different way because I didn't know how to have this reservoir or emotional container to hold my feelings. No one ever taught me that because I didn't understand how to regulate my own nervous system. I didn't know that, your feelings didn't like you could handle your feelings and it didn't have to be too big for your body. But sometimes what happens, we just don't learn those things. Like, in school, you learn them now. Like people devote themselves to yoga for that mind body connection, mind body spirit connection. There are somatic tools like EFT, there's EMDR, there's hypnotherapy, there's meditation, like all of these different things. There's journaling, there's talking to friends, there's support groups, there's therapy. Like I just list a bunch of tools for you to use if you have a hard time sitting in your feelings and just being in the present moment. Like, and it is a journey. And I remember being on this sober journey and realizing how I couldn't really name my emotions and experience what sadness was because I thought that these emotions were too big for my body. I literally remember working with a mentor and I had to look at a feeling map. Like, what does sadness feel like? What does grief feel like? What does disappointment feel like? What does hopelessness feel like? What does blah, blah, blah? And there's so many variations of all these emotions of sadness and joy and anger. And, it's kind of like falls into three different pillars. And so just being in that space of learning what is that emotionally complex language, it was about building a muscle. And sometimes I would think, well, am I the only person in this world that doesn't know how to feel my emotions? Or, why am I learning it at this age? I feel really defective. I feel really dumb. I feel really stupid. And in actuality, working with a lot of my clients, I realized I felt the same things, right? Sometimes you want to shame yourself or you think that you are the only person that has to learn this. And I remember even saying that stuff to my own therapist of I'm so embarrassed that I have to learn this now at this age. But if you didn't learn it and no one ever taught you, then why do you expect yourself to know how to do that? And we often hear that example of expecting a baby to learn how to walk before it can crawl. And so there are all these different micro steps to get to where we are. And so it's so important to give us the grace and the compassion of being on your healing journey because, like, dismantle your inner critic. There's no room for that when you're healing. There's no room for judgment. There's no room for condemnation. Um, it's just like you're defecating on yourself. And so I just, had a mixture of shame plus awe, inspiration, curiosity, and I would just feel so raw all the time. Like I felt skinned. I didn't know how to process these things, but I trusted the process. I trusted that eventually I would get there. And what helped me was doing a check-in with myself every day. Like, what am I thinking? How am I feeling? I remember putting different alarms on my phone saying, "How are you feeling now? What's coming up? right? So first part was like the mind. The mind had to identify things. The mind had to be able to verbalize and articulate what was happening, right? And that was like, for me, I guess it's kind of backwards. So it was a mind. It was a mind that had to learn this language. And I worked on that and it became embodied. Embodied also just means like, you know, almost like being a habit where you don't even think about it. It's like reactive. And so I got really, really good at naming feelings, why I was the way I was, where these coping mechanisms came from, pinpointing different memories. And that's because, I had a therapist. I was talking about my feelings when I never talked about my feelings because we just did not do that in my family. I didn't like, you don't do that at work. Right? There's like you don't do that at work. And so it's interesting because you live life day to day and you're like, there's just these environments that aren't really conducive to sharing what's really coming up for you. And I mean, even think about it when you greet someone and you say, "Hey, how you doing?" Does the person really want to have an open conversation, or is it just a natural reaction to greet someone? It's the same thing as saying hi. And so you just say, "Good, good, I'm good. Had a great weekend. It was awesome. It was fun. I can't believe it's so short." It's just like the day-to-day talk of stuff. And so, how do you become real in these conversations? And, I did mention before in a couple of podcast episodes, like sometimes I forget that a lot of people don't know how to have these conversations. And I remember when I did my women's circle in June this past year, a lot of women didn't know that other people had inner critics because we just don't talk about it. There's just not this sense of shared vulnerability, of shared intimacy and trust. Because we don't really know how to release our masks to really show up in a way that allows us to be free in expressing who we are. And so it's very interesting because I remember when I would, first write my email newsletters, a lot of people would reach out to me and they would say, "Wow, you are so deep. You share a lot of stuff." And even on my podcast, like a couple of old colleagues, they said, "Yeah, I know way more about you than you know about me." And that's because I no longer have anything to hide from. Like, not, I don't believe that anything is intrinsically wrong with me that I need to keep from you. Because at the end of the day, when I think about, and like, sure, there are certain things that are private and I'll respect other people, but those stories, those lessons, they die with you. And what good would it be if I didn't share them in order to help someone else and on their healing journey? And so essentially that's actually, one of the primary reasons and motivations of why I do what I do, why I share and love sharing a lot of personal stories is because one, it helps me, process them. It helps me understand that it can help someone else. And, the third reason is that I just love expressing myself. As someone who felt like they could not, the expression of self is integral to my being. And I really dislike it if I'm not able to share. Like even if I'm in group settings and I can't share, I'm like, God damn it, I can't share. What? And so I say this because it has been a journey. So understanding the vernacular behind expressing emotions, identifying emotions, what does that actually look like, growing in therapy, understanding certain things and dynamics. It's like, you're in it in real time and you don't understand what's going on. And it can be this ambiguous thing and almost nebulous, but you also have to have faith and trust the process that in the act of doing it, you will get there. You will get there and you are building that muscle. It's kind of like when you're going to the gym, you don't see any of your muscles yet, but you know that doing, these exercises will help you get toned or more fit. But you just have to keep showing up. You have to keep practicing, keep getting messy, keep being imperfect, allow yourself grace and compassion. And eventually it'll come to a point where you realize like, oh, okay. And like with all things, it just comes with time, right? Like this concept that has been really, being inculcated in me is how I feel about time. It's the value of time, whether it's a financial monetary exchange or how people want, more time as they get older. Um, or how even younger kids, they want to grow up. They want time to move faster. And, when you think about the present moment, what does it mean to surrender to your timeline, even? What does that look like if there were no bounds, if there was no past or future? It was just now. And so, when I think about this idea of allowing time and showing up and giving yourself that opportunity to experience and be imperfect in your vulnerability and share certain things, like, you really, really have to let go of a lot of things. Not only the timeline of when you think you will be fully healed, because newsflash, and I hate to break it to you, there is no done. There is no finish line. Sometimes the same thing will re-trigger you. And just because it does not mean that you are regressing. It does not mean that you need to relearn another lesson. It just means like, okay, I can now experience this same, trigger in a different way where it hits me differently and I can feel it more deeply because my nervous system is able to hold this deeper emotion. And that is okay because I have the emotional capacity to alchemize it, to process it, to feel it in my body and know that I will not be taken out. And so don't ever think that you are regressing in your healing. Like you are doing the work, you have awareness, you're doing your journaling exercises, maybe you're connecting in community with other people that are supporting each other, holding each other accountable, like all of that good stuff. Or maybe you're exploring the idea of working with a therapist and you don't know what that's going to look like, of like sharing your insights because you learned at a young age that you weren't allowed to. And so it's just, it's like this whole process of how do you transcend these patterns and coping mechanisms that you've dealt with and you've built in order to keep yourself safe because they are no longer serving you, right? They're feeding those narratives, those negative beliefs, those limiting beliefs. And how do you actually break through them and create this new paradigm of living where you can be in your pleasure, where you can reach for your desires and not feel like you have to judge yourself for feeling so good or that you have to hide who you are. Because, from my experience of feeling like I had to hide parts of me, that really, really honed in that concept of emotional containment, of I couldn't bring my whole self to situations. And it also allowed me to become this sort of shapeshifter, right? And so when I would think about, well, why do I feel like I can't be my true self? It's because I learned emotional containment. I learned to repress parts of myself. And that's why we do shadow work, is to unearth that. Like there is nothing bad about you. You were just taught that those things were unacceptable. And the reason why they were unacceptable is because other people couldn't see that or meet that in themselves because what you were expressing made them uncomfortable. That is their shit, not your shit. And so you were not too much. I heard this in Never Have I Ever. You are always enough and never too much. Say that as an affirmation to yourself. Literally, that is your coaching exercises for me for the week. Look in the mirror. No. You can look in the mirror, and I also want you to get a baby photo of yourself because we're all about inner child work here. Get a photo of yourself and look at your little baby you and say, You are always enough and never too much. Okay? And when you start to do those things, when you start to reparent yourself and become your own cosmic parent of really treating and speaking to yourself the way that you want it to be treated, the way you want it to be loved, the way you always want it to be accepted, you start to learn and create these different neural pathways that you can express all of yourself. And the reason why I talk so much about the self-love journey is because it starts with self. If you start relying or asking other people to do those things for you, to accept you, to create space for you, to allow you to be yourself, then you're always going to be dependent externally. And we want you to be able to feel like you can walk into any room and just be who you are. And so it's all about creating this safe container within you first to experience all of your emotions. So if you want to have a good relationship with yourself, practice, you know, not withholding, not containing anything, just allowing yourself to free flow. Cry if you want to, be angry with you want to. Like oftentimes I'm working with a lot of clients and the logical mind jumps in and kind of hijacks the emotional process of being human. This emotion isn't right. It's like automatically judging our emotions. Like, oh, as someone is like telling me the downloads of a challenge they're having, like automatically they'll sometimes stop themselves and say like, no, this sounds stupid. But it's like, in order for you to process those things, you got to admit the stupid stuff. You have to admit the stuff that makes you uncomfortable, because otherwise that's just stuffing it down. You're repressing it, and it's going to show out sideways, either by you disassociating or self-sabotaging, or worse, self-hatred. Like, which, is like speaking bad to yourself, and it's another form of self-mutilation. And I say these things very gravely because that is how you're treating yourself. And to really hone it in and make it tangible, if you had a child, if you had your baby you in front of you, and I hope you wouldn't tell your kid to not express their emotions. Like, you allow them to feel it. You allow them to self-soothe. You allow them to understand the emotions that are coming up so that they know how to hold it in their nervous system, and that they can talk about it, they can journal about it, they can do deep breathing exercises, they can meditate on it, they can get angry, they can like punch in the pillow, they can scream, they can shake, they can move their body, they can do anything to like feel that energy and emotion so it doesn't stay stagnant in our bodies and show up as different physical ailments. Because, and I forget where I read this, but I read that a lot of people will have a hard time and difficulty of feeling their emotions. And it's actually easier to feel physical symptoms of pain because emotional pain is too much. And so, how the emotional pain shows up in the body is through physical pain. They can tolerate that. They can tolerate, you know, pain in their back, as opposed to pain in their heart, the emotional sensation, right? And so when I'm doing EFT with people, I very much talk to them about what are the physical sensations, but then also the emotional sensations, right? That's completely different, right? So physical can be like a tightness in the chest, a lump in your throat. Maybe you feel it in your lower back. Maybe you feel a physical sensation in your stomach, like a gut punch, right? Maybe you feel tingles. And so really learn to create that connection between the physical and emotional sensations that are holding energy within your body. And that's the next step of my journey. So not only, one, it was to identify and say like, hey, I'm totally disassociated. How the hell do I get back to being in my body and being present and understanding this thing and, having this vernacular and language of expressing myself? So that was the mind. The second part to it was understanding how it felt in my body. So just as I explained, it was about, identifying these physical sensations in my body. Where was it? Even ascribing a color to it, maybe ascribing a shape to it. And that's why I love EFT, is because we get to do that also with different emotions that we hold and we carry on a specific memory or topic or experience. And then, I started doing EMDR, and really feeling like where is it in my body, and then doing different embodiment practices and all of that stuff. So it's just creating a different connection to what is the body feeling in that certain moment. And there are so many different tools, but what it comes down to is when being able to relax your nervous system in order for you to hold that emotion. And I remember a long time ago, I was working with this meditation teacher in New York, and we meditated a lot. He taught me how to create this reservoir within myself to understand that I could hold these emotions. And if I allowed myself to experience them, because there's no way of bypassing. I'm sure you can do all these different things to disassociate, but the feeling will always be there. And the best and most loving and caring thing that you can do for yourself is being able to allow yourself to acknowledge what's coming up. Allow yourself to be seen by you. Allow yourself to be loved by you. Allow yourself to be cared by you. And when you start to do that and know how to hold space for yourself, you will no longer need other people to validate your feelings, because you validate yourself. And of course, it's always important to get a second opinion, like if you want that, but you are your own best healer. You are your own best teacher. And I'm always such a proponent of tuning and tapping into your own internal wisdom, your inner truth, your inner guidance, your inner voice, your inner you, your inner goddess, like all of that. The wisdom lies within you. And so in a society that always constantly tells us so many different things that we need to do, blah, 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 like turn back to you. Self-source, self-love. It's not a they love journey. It's a self-love journey. And it's an inner child journey, not other people's journey. It's yours. You're the protagonist. It's a plot girl summer. And so, after being able to really, really hone in on my body and understand, then it became the third piece of like integrating that. What does it look like? Feeling it on body first and then expressing it to someone, of articulating that, of how do I communicate that, understanding my inner realm first. And it also, and so that was an interesting experience. And then afterwards, it became, how do I have emotional conversations with other people and vulnerability? And I will admit, when I first started really, dabbling into coaching and really, really working one-on-one with people, I want to say like 20. Well, at first, I didn't want to. I was always a mentee to other people. I was always getting coached. I always loved getting all that good stuff and soaking up information and knowledge and experience and how people do different things. And I just didn't feel the need to coach other people. But this one woman asked me. And so it was, I want to say maybe like 2020 is like when I really made it formal of coaching people. I didn't even announce it publicly yet because I didn't publicly launch until 2022. But I decided to work with someone. And I remember working with this person and I felt uncomfortable. Not because it wasn't a good vibe, but because holding space. I was the type of person where I didn't know what to do when people cried. That shows you just how uncomfortable I was with other people's emotions. Like I was literally like a deer in headlights, like, what the fuck do you do? Like, I feel so uncomfortable now. Like, what? And it's interesting because other people had held space for me, and expressing myself, that was just something that it was, of course, I went from the, one side of the spectrum where it was like not expressing to like totally expressing everything. And then eventually I reached recalibration, and I was able to have this balance of like knowing when to say my feelings, how to say it, blah, 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 all of that, and like create scripts. And I just got really good at communicating my part and my needs and all of that. And then when it came to being the recipient, the receiver, I had to contain it for others. And that is a very, very different job, right? When you are containing your emotions for yourself, like it was very comfortable for me. And so when other person brought their vulnerability, it was like, oh, this is a different fucking ball game. And it's something that I don't think many people talk about, because a lot of it is reflected on how much can you share your needs, because a lot of people don't have their own voice. It was kind of stripped away from them. And so when you're in a very fortunate opportunity for someone to consider you as a safe landing place to share what's in their heart, to share their truth, it is a fucking privilege. And to share emotions, whether they're deep, whether they're, light and their levity to it, being able to know that they consider you a safe space to share their authentic selves is a gift and a privilege, because you can honor them, you can acknowledge them, you can see them, you can be that trusted, person that can also validate them and create a healing experience. And so that was something that I really had to work on is, oh, like, how do I do this? I feel uncomfortable. And then again, I had to sit with myself of understanding, why am I uncomfortable? What about it makes me sad? What about it makes it feel so awkward? And it was this piece of, other people don't need to be fixed. They just need to be seen. They just need to be heard. That's it. Can you see them in a light that empowers them? And that's all you have to do, is just be present with them in the moment, experiencing with them what they're experiencing, and not projecting anything. Oftentimes we think that the only reason why we exist is because we provide value, we are impactful, we are a resource to other people. And sometimes that might come off as offering solutions, as wanting to fix something. Sometimes it's hard for us to see other people in pain because we can't do anything. We feel powerless. So again, it's like the heavy emotions of feeling powerless, of feeling hopeless. But the greatest thing you can do for someone is empower them to believe that they can handle the situation for themselves. And also, a very important caveat, like, ask them, do you want me to listen to you? Do you want me to offer you advice? Would you like advice? Do you want me to share my experience? Just ask people, right? A lot of times people don't know what they want or know what they need. And so it's important to create that conversation, right? And giving people the practice of that muscle. And so I feel as if, it is a long journey, but you're on the journey. You're doing it every day. You're trying your best. You're doing your best, all of that stuff. And it's not perfect. It's not linear. It's cyclical, different seasons. And, you just do the best you can. And, it just feels really good right now to, be able to hold the emotions for myself and hold emotions for other people. It feels really fulfilling. It feels really good in my heart. these heartfelt conversations. Like that's the tagline on my HeartStream Musings podcast. That's why I called it HeartStream. And it's so funny to see it full circle as someone who was so disconnected from my body, but my heart. I get to lead people back to their hearts. And so if you are on the self-help, it is self-help, self-love healing journey, just know that you're not alone and that they're all different tools. There are different practices that you can do to help build and strengthen that muscle of being vulnerable and being able to have the courage and confidence and feel empowered to share your true self in the world. But it definitely has to start with you. And if you want one-on-one help with that, I would love, love, love to support you. Right now, I am accepting people on my wait list to work with me in November. And I have 4 spots open. It's available for the 4 souls that really, really, really want to work on healing their inner child wounds, to unlock their heart and awaken to their own divinity, their own power. And I would love to support you. So feel free, it's in the show notes, to hit me up. I'm on Instagram at Lisa May Coaching. You can also find me on my website, lisamaycoaching.com, where I have all the information of how to get in touch with me. We will hop on a call, 45-minute call, where we will just unpack what's coming up for you. What is blocking you on your self-love journey? What core wounds are coming up? How can we make you feel empowered, feel confident, feel like you can be your true self just anywhere you go? And so I really hope this podcast served you. And I always end all my podcasts with this question. And so I'm going to ask you today, what are you doing to fill your own self-love cup and connect to the little you? All right, peoples. I will talk to you later. I hope you have a wonderful day. And please connect with me. I love hearing from you. And before I wrap up, I also want to put this plug in that if you are in the San Francisco area, I am hosting a Women's Day retreat. I got so much energy from hosting my self-love cacao women's circles. I wanted to do something longer for y'all, and it's going to be fire. It's going to be so juicy. It's all about tapping into your shadows. We talked a lot about that in this episode, even though I fully didn't call it out, but those repressed parts that are in that emotional containment concept that I talked about. Yep, we're going to get into that. There's going to be some cacao to open our hearts, get out of our body. Get out of our body, get out of our heads into our body and our hearts. And we will have some movement, and we will do kintsugi art, which is the practice of breaking ceramics and putting it together with lacquered gold. And so I would love for you to attend. Right now, there is a discount code. So for 10% off, you can use SHADOW10, SHADOW 10. And I would love to see you there. It's happening September 9th from 1 to 5 p.m. in San Francisco. Check out my Instagram. Check out, my website, Eventbrite, for all of the good stuff. All right, folks, I will catch you later. Have a beautiful day. And if you love this episode, share it with people. Just share and spread the word. All right, I will talk to you soon. Bye.